to parts where I went, did I hear that right? And it really was thought-provoking. So anyway, through the wormhole.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I was just listening. Yeah, so what'd they say about time?
I don't know. I'm too tired, I think, to be able to recall too much of it. It's a fabulous show, though, Cliff. It's on, I think it's the Science Network. This 13-year-old daughter of mine watches it, and it's called Through the Wormhole.
Like with, what's his name?
Morgan Freeman.
Oh, okay. No, I wasn't thinking of him. Okay. All right, sure. I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
It's hosted by Morgan Freeman, and it goes into some really, really interesting things. And they present it in a way that even the addle-minded such as I can pick it up on it pretty well. So,
this is curious because of a couple of large-scale archetypical shifts that are going on at the moment, and one of them has led me to a very intense interest in time showing up in its visibility component in the media. Because if we examine the previous depressions, going back even all the way back to like 1605, and follow them forward, we see this weird trend of things where every depression in a fiat money system is accompanied by a burst of technological or a spread of technology. Not necessarily the creation of it, but the spread of it, the disbursement of it. So George Ure had the initial part of this. He triggered me over into thinking about it, and I went back and did some research most recently and discovered that the Manhattan Project, being in the 40s, is referenced by the CERN project in the 90s and 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. And the amount of money we've spent relative to CERN dwarfs Manhattan by several orders of magnitude and must be examined on a global scale. So I think time is going to be the next big technology, if you will, or at least that's the idea of the powers that be. That's where they want us to go.
One thing that did come to me, Cliff, that is, as you were talking, was one of the parts of that show. They talked about the rate of radioactive decay and how that was in physics thought to be never changing.
Invariant. Yes,
a constant. Yes. And what this researcher had found was that it's not a constant, and it varies based off of incoming solar radiation.
Actually, sure, yeah. I wrote up about that in the whole deal about the rate of decay of carbon-14 because it throws all kinds of stuff into question.
There you go, and the medical implications of it, of chemotherapy or diagnostic tools.
Okay, that's an issue. Are we recording now?
No, We're not. Oh, we are. Oops. Sorry.
We are. Somebody doing the recording?
I'm doing the recording. Yeah.
We got it.
Okay, because this brings up a really curious and very, very pertinent subject. The radioactive decay rate, the Fukushima thing, and the idea of radiation, chemotherapy, and so on. And there's been some suggestion in the data from some time that we're going to... there's all kinds of stuff in there in terms of relative to medical stuff. It's almost as bad as celebrities in terms of the overall level of noise. But I went and did some research and have found that indeed there is a good level of noise around the idea of radioactivity and the scrubbing technologies that we're going to come into. And then curiously, here's a rumor that's been out and about that I came across the other day. The rumor is that the Japanese officialdom has quietly allowed the importation of active hemp oil. Now, not hemp seed oil, but active THC present ingredient hemp oil, with the idea that this stuff will be consumed orally, not smoked, but ingested by little spoonfuls by upper-level officialdom, because it has been shown to be so effective in sweeping radiation from this system in those people that have had chemotherapy and radiation treatment. So the hemp oil is good for you in a lot of different ways, like the flax oil and all of this other stuff in the more raw foods, which we should all be gravitating towards in any event. But there have been some levels of proof, and the fact that the officialdom have clamped down on people like Rick Simpson and others, Heinrich, I forget his name in Sweden, the big proponent for it. But it's like, okay, so now the Japanese, they're not admitting anything, but the officialdom is taking active steps to protect themselves, even doing something that breaks one of the laws that MacArthur put in place. You have to understand how the Japanese social structure has just been so hidebound by the laws that were put in place after World War II, including the laws against the production of marijuana from the hemp plant. And so the fact that they're doing this is a huge temporal marker relative to that. And it also, by the way, says, there is significantly something there if the Japanese government is basically smuggling the stuff into its own people against its own laws.
Well, Cliff,
that's incredible.
And Cliff, I was about ready to sign off when you came back. I've got about as far as I can go. So this is Turd Ferguson thanking you for the opportunity to visit.
Sure.
And, again, I want to thank the WebBot Forum, too, for including me in the discussion.
Yeah, it's really cool. Very nice of you to join. Yeah.
Thanks, Sid. We're speaking with Clif High. Please support Clif and find out what the collective future may hold at halfpasthuman.com. The next section is Terror and Survival. Lenny.
Hi, Clif. In an email to a forum member earlier this month, you reckoned that it would take 11 months until the molten fuel from Fukushima hits the groundwater or the aquifer. Is that estimate based on WebBot language or other data? And if it's based on other data or information, could you please explain in as much detail as possible about how it works, for example, how the geography of Japan impacts the time it takes for that hot radioactive liquid to reach the aquifers of Asia?
Sure. Yeah, it's in fact a outgrowth of the data set that we had for the ill winds. And at the time that we had the data sets for the ill winds, there was an interpretation of 9 times around the planet. Now, you have to understand how numbers arise and how we have to discard most of them and why we paid attention to that and how easy it is to misinterpret the numbers. So while I thought of it as 9 times around the planet, it probably is better thought of as 9 sources, because we actually have on the planet right at the moment, we've got 9 reactors that are in severe straits, 6 of them in Japan, 2 of them here in the United States, and then one, I forget where it is at the moment. It's just somewhere in Europe. It's long past its lifespan. I think it's one of the French ones, but I'm not sure. Anyway, though, the point being that the Fukushima disaster is still unfolding. We've yet to see even probably the first quarter of it, let alone half of its effect. So I started looking at that because it directly impacts me. We have here our nice little rad meter, and I'm going to turn it on to audio, and we'll just get it in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear it as we're going along, but what I did was to do a Buckminster Fuller style understanding of the continental structure, the remnants of the continental structure of Japan, and what we have yet to face. And basically what they did was they took a questionable design of a GE nuke plant and they reinforced it in the bottom with extra cement on a layer of volcanic soil. All of the descriptions of the Japanese area can be had either from the Japanese government sites or through the UN if you want to go through that way, because the UN does surveys about the nuke plants very extensively, actually. And so you can go all the way back into the 50s there. Some of the data around Fukushima suggest that we'll see a pooling into a layer of volcanic rock that is a natural drainage source, and that's not actually the aquifer that is at risk. The aquifer that is at risk is underneath a granite or bedrock cap, and for a while back in the 40s, Japan actually thought they had oil there, but then they discovered, oh, well, it's just water. But it's actually the very large resource, and they were in the process of exploring it. For the northern islands, though, that aquifer is probably going to be the most horrific thing ever. And the reason that we're calculating the 11 months is that's based on the WebBot data and how the ill winds played out. So we're just taking that because the unknowns of how fast it's melting, there's no real information coming out of Japan as to how far it's gotten in there. But you can actually go and look at the topology and morphology of the rock of the region and see that it's layers of volcanics material overlaid on a harder quartz-based bedrock, not basalt and not granite really, but an amalgam of basically the crustal or a coastal region uplands of the larger continent of Asia. So the WebBot data suggested that 11 months from basically a 31-month period of time before the whole thing not fades out, but is past its peak. And then we count back the 21 months of the actual steaming, and there you go, 11 months from incept at the pooling stage to eating through into the water. And that's going to cause real problems for all of Asia, not just us, too. We're going to get the radiation to the wind. They're going to get the aquifers contaminated.
Well, and I was reading about aquifers that they're transboundary and that they basically the whole of Asia will share the waters mix at some point, and so it could really hit. That's
correct. Yes, and I think too that the aquifer that is at risk, the larger one, is at a level where it is in that area that actually joins directly to a large aquifer under China.
Yeah.
If I can explain this right, it's not trapped in the Japanese island. It is actually within the continental shelf area that the Japanese islands sit on.
Yeah, I was reading something like that too.
Yeah, so it's quite frightening, and the Chinese are taking it very seriously. And this also may account for their recent increase in the flow of cement into the ghost cities.
Yeah.
In the sense they may have to evacuate the coastal population because of radioactive water. They're getting people in Japan now that have measurable levels in the hundreds of thousands of the minor parts of radioactivity measurements. In other words, you used to have 0 and they've got 100,000 BQ readings, or they've got measurable levels of cesium in their systems. So the Chinese, I don't know how the Chinese are going to react. They have those cities. They appeared to be designed for coastal evac anyway. They may decide to evacuate when they start detecting really serious levels of radiation within the water system, simply because of the cost to their social structure of a plague of birth defects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not for any real feeling for the people per se.
And speaking of perishing, Richard Sauter has a question that I'd like to read for you, which is, how many people do the WebBots foresee physically perishing between now and mid-2013?
It depends on how you want to read the data. Okay, it's not as though the data sets explicitly have a numeric value that says that, like a census that says here's the population of the planet. So we have to make inferences. And bear in mind that the articles or the words that we're going to be getting in this are not implying anything. There's no intent on the part of an author